So what we've done, right? So when I first got here, we were awarding around 85 million bucks in Indian small business, right? Over the past 3 years, we've increased that by about 230%. We do about $280 million last year for Indian small business, and we anticipate doing well over 300 million this year. That's our goal. And we've been able to do that by focusing on basically four things. One, and first and foremost, is improving the visibility, right? Without the data and without building tools that helps us analyze what it is that we're doing and in the acquisition procurement world and what it is, where opportunities are available to us. But without that laser focus on providing awareness, I don't think we would have gotten where we are right now. And I can tell you that my staff and I are, and the department at this point is really focused on increasing opportunities to Indian small business. And I'm going to go over a few of those things in a moment. The second thing we were able to do, and we built many dashboards and we're broadcasting regularly. These meetings are part of that as far as providing visibility. But we had to make people accountable. Again, 3 years ago, we weren't competing, but about 70% of all the contracts. Now we're about 85%. At 15% in awarded dollars doesn't sound like a whole lot, but it's a huge difference in dollars that are going out. As Nancy Reagan used to say back in the 80s, for those of you who are old enough to know who that is, she used to say, just say no. It was in her war on drugs, but we like to say, just say no to those who don't want to go buy Indian. And we've done so with our contract officers. The good news here is not everybody works for me in the acquisition business across Indian Affairs, but everybody is responsible to me. And that helps when it comes to saying no and making people go back and rethink about competitions and who they're going to award to. So I think that focus, and certainly the focus from Tony Lomlin and his folks over in the policy team, and my Brian Sholkoff and the operations folks, it's been a fantastic turnaround for what it is that we're doing in our focus. So the accountability was a key part. Engagement and education, obviously making Indian business more aware and smarter. That's PTAC engagement is certainly part of that. Engaging with the contracting officers throughout Indian Affairs and throughout Department of Interior. Developing education. I can tell you we're in the process of developing an education. I'm sorry, somebody had something? That's the problem with these events. Sometimes we don't know when we're on mute, when we're not on mute. So I do that all the time as well. So for whoever was out there, I'm not trying to call you out. We're trying to improve education opportunities. We're developing an online course right now that we're very proud of. We should be out in June, July timeframe, or actually July timeframe. It's June now. July timeframe, hopefully. We're going to make that mandatory for all contract officers inside and outside Indian Affairs throughout the Department of Interior. So increasing that awareness, we're going to continue to focus on that, but it's been a huge deal being able to meet with you all and to engage. A huge part of our success has been making it easier to do. And when I say that, when I first got here, again, we didn't have any IDIQs or BPAs, these smart acquisition vehicles that were literally built to encourage and make it easier to use, leverage, buy Indian business. When we started, again, there was nothing. Over the last 3.5 years, we put in place $1.1 billion worth of buy Indian smart acquisition vehicles, targeting everything from construction to counseling services, from IT to distance learning support. So far this year, we've already put in place over 100 million smart acquisition vehicles. And by the end of this year, we will award almost $2 billion more in smart acquisition vehicles. And I might add, not only are they $2 billion more in these vehicles, they're department-wide vehicles that are eligible to use, not only most of them department-wide, some of them even IHS-wide. So again, by building those vehicles, like Kevin Costner said, or whoever, maybe the ghost in Kevin Costner's Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. That's kind of the idea here. We've built some great vehicles that make it a lot easier and a lot quicker to do the acquisition business. And we've already seen a huge success. I think a huge success in our numbers, and certainly being able to award $485 million worth of acquisitions last year, which is twice as much than we did 3 years ago. Some of those awards, just to let you know, kind of across the board, what we're doing, we're putting in place a $1.5 billion department-wide construction multiple award contract, i.e. the CMAC contract, which we'll be able to use for large construction projects. That's, again, department-wide vehicle, so anybody would be able to leverage that. We're putting together a $50 to $100 million A&E, architecture and engineering IDIQ with the Division of Water and Power. We're putting together a $210 million department-wide and IHS Business Support Services IDIQ, which should be done here over the next 90 to 120 days. And we're putting together a $100 million department-wide management industrial engineering consulting IDIQ. We have a few more, like the $50 million law enforcement support contract that I won't go into, and some other things, but huge opportunities to, again, promote the use and make it easy for our contracting officers and for other bureaus to leverage Indian business. So that being said, I know a lot of the press right now is we've done something else, right? You might have heard about our update of the Buy Indian Act regulations, right? It only took us a few years, but it's done, right? As of April 8th, we were able to publish the new Buy Indian acquisition regulations, which does some key things here. And I'll let my folks get into the in-depth piece of it, but the basic economics of it is that it took off eliminated the barriers, that is, to Indian economic enterprises from competing on certain construction projects. Before, there was a covered construction project. Now there is not that barrier, which from all intents and purposes opens up construction specifically with the BIL Act and others, with billions of dollars worth of opportunities over the next few years in construction. So it's a huge endeavor. That one single piece of policy making, I believe, is probably the biggest thing that's happened and will happen to promoting opportunities and pumping money into Indian country than there has been in the last probably 25 years. It also expands Indian economic enterprise ability to subcontract, just like consistent with other socioeconomic set-aside programs. And it gives preference to Indian economic enterprises, bigger Indian business, when there's a deviation from the Buy Indian Act. Now, both that everything that we've done supports Indian Community Economic Enhancements Act of 2020. It also supports the President's management agenda of aligning with the efforts to increase opportunities for disadvantaged businesses. So all of that being said, I think you're going to see over the next few years a significant increase. I anticipate that though we're going to do around 300, maybe 320, $350 million, as high as all that in Indian business this year, I think 3 years from now, we're going to be talking about 5, 6, maybe even $750 million just in Indian affairs. Now, we're not talking about something that I'll talk about here in a minute on what we're planning to do, having goals set aside for the rest of the Department of Interior, which again will create a huge amount of opportunity. So what is it that we plan to do? We continue to engage, right? And when I say that, not just with you all at the PTAX, we're engaging with everybody inside and outside the Department of Interior. We're constantly talking with our other bureaus to find opportunities for them to leverage the Buy Indian Act. We're already doing some of that work. We're currently working with the National Park Service on 4 projects that are leveraging the demo IDIQ that we put in place. We're working with the Bureau of Reclamation on a demo project as well. And we're currently working with BLM to identify opportunities for set-asides as part of their $500 million orphaned well IDIQ development project that they're doing right now. So I'm anticipating that we're going to get more and more of those efforts as we get closer to what we're trying to do now, which is working with the department to set a goal, just like other small business goals that we have currently right now through our small business OSDBU. We're working with the department to establish a goal department-wide that will be in place in 2023. That means it'll be on everybody's all executive plans, and it will provide a yearly goal like we have for other small disadvantaged businesses, whether they be veteran-owned or women-owned or minority-owned or whatever the case may be. It'll set a goal that all department bureaus will have to achieve, or whatever that means, right? I think that's a huge deal. I don't have specifics on the percentage of that amount of procurement that will happen. Again, they're trying to socialize that now and figure out what the best route is, but I think that's a huge development. We went from just Indian Affairs playing kind of in the box to being all in Indian Affairs and getting others across the Department of Interior and the federal government space, for that matter, to look at Indian-owned businesses and to participate. And we're promoting every opportunity we can. I've been working with our Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary, Bizapan, to look at other opportunities that will help Indian small business. For example, and for those who cannot leverage the Buy Indian Act, there's always 8A. We're currently looking at the numbers of 8A businesses that are Indian-owned businesses in hopes that we can provide some matchmaking opportunities, again, easy procurement opportunities for other agencies outside the Department of Interior to understand where these businesses are, where these opportunities are, and make it easier for them to do it. I can tell you that from the data that I'm looking at, we're in the works of developing an analytical tool that will be available to folks to kind of analyze where those opportunities are and make it easier for them to identify them. So we're really excited about that effort as well. Again, working with the department to set that goal, I'm confident that that's going to happen in 2023. Other than that, I don't know. I've run my mouth now for at least 10 minutes. So maybe somebody has any questions for me. I'd be glad to answer anything that you have. All I can tell you is that look forward to some good things happening. I can tell you all of my folks, my focus, my Deputy Assistant Secretary's focus, and the Secretary's focus, for that matter, is on how do we expand opportunities, economic opportunities for all of Indian country. And I can tell you that there's not a higher priority in my office, and this is a very large priority with the administration. So with that, I'll again shut up and give you a chance to ask any questions you might have. Anybody? Somebody's got to have something. Like, Jim, can I get some of that information you just shot off on? Anybody? Be brave.
Hi. Good afternoon, Mr. Anderton. This is Vanessa Gleach with the AIC of PTAC. I don't see any thing in the chat, but I would like to thank you for the introduction that you provided to us. And I know with all native PTACs, we'd be very interested in all the acquisitions that you spoke about. If you could send those to us, just giving us a heads up so that we can disseminate them to all of the Native American businesses, tribal enterprises, Alaskan Native corporations that we currently work with, to at least give you qualified firms or even subcontractors that can perform on these acquisitions. It would be greatly appreciated.
What's the difference between BIL and the Buy Indian Act?
Well, the Buy Indian Act is a law that provides direct action to the Bureau of Indian Affairs to procure, when at all possible, services and goods from Indian-owned businesses. BIL is an infrastructure bill for building better. It does not stipulate that there is any preference for small or any disadvantaged businesses, as far as I know. And it's a BIL is an actual act that provides funding, right? So billions and billions of dollars of funding for various things, for construction, infrastructure improvement, and so forth.
Okay, that's not directly targeting business enterprises?
In infrastructure, yes.
Okay,
Yep, definitely infrastructure. I mean, that's the goal of all that. The significant portion of that money is for building America's infrastructure plan and construction. Good question.
that's all I had. Thanks.
Yep.
Okay,
Anybody?
here's, Mr. Anderson, will there, this is a question in the chat, will you be issuing a list of the IDIQ contracts you mentioned? And will
I
they
can
be
certainly do
posted?
that. So that's second, you asked for that and now somebody else has that. That's a good plan. So Nick's on the call here and so is Brian, I know. Brian or Nick, please provide these folks with a listing of our current IDIQs, if you could, please.
Will do.
Okay,
That's what I
then
like
there's,
to say. It's just that quick. It'll probably be in you guys' chat thing here in about 5 minutes.
yes, and then I think this will be covered later on in the presentation, but here's another question. What are some of the more popular NAICS codes that are used under, I guess it would be by Indian?
Wow. So the NIAC codes, and I am no expert, by the way, in NIAC codes. I am currently looking at the data. I can tell you that the NIAC codes associated with construction certainly are where most of the dollars are going. I don't know what the first 3 of that is. Maybe one of my folks does off the top of their head. I was looking at it the other day. I know for energy, when we were talking about some renewable energy contracts, I believe that's 221 first, the first numbers. But the ones associated with IT certainly are going by Indian because we have the big items IDIQ that we are mandated use for IT products and goods. Our construction NIAC codes certainly. The support services for counseling services, I know, is the NIAC codes associated with that. Let's see here. We have a lot of energy type things like the propanes and the others that we've done. We've done one on, and again, Nick, you probably have some of those numbers in front of you right now. I think he can go into that, but I would say the lion's share of the money goes out to the construction on by Indian.
Okay.
You're talking about overarching.
Yes. And then here's another question is, is there a certification process for by Indian or is it self-certifying?
Still self-certifying whether you are, what type of business you are in SAMS. So when you certify, it's still certification of that. The Buy Indian Act, basically any of the recognized tribes are associated with that. So if you are in SAMS and you identify as such, you're eligible for Buy Indian. And again, that goes Buy Indian Small Business, ISB. And then it goes Indian Economic Enterprise now that we changed the Indian. Before, by the way, in case you didn't know, the little intricacy again, I think my folks will hit this. Other than the covered, redacting the covered construction note that was in the Buy Indian Act, which was huge. The second big change to the Buy Indian Act that's very significant is before we had to go, when we were putting out an acquisition, we had to go first look at Indian small business. And then if there was nobody around that could do that for Indian small business, we had to go right to our other small business, right? With it weren't Indian. And then we would go to Indian Economic Enterprises, backed to the larger Indian businesses. Now we go directly from ISBs to IEEs. We don't have to go to small business before then. So again, it gives us a second and bigger bite of the apple for those Indian businesses to compete and be awarded contracts prior to anybody else. It's a huge deal.
Okay, and then here's the another question that was posted in SAM. There used to be a designation for ISB, but now what they've done is they've changed it to IEE. So are the contracting officers looking at the IEE and then based on the NAICS code determining that's a small business?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll let whoever that was.
This is Brian Jim Sholka, Chief of the Contracting Office for Indian Affairs. I wasn't aware of that change, but that's how a contracting officer would determine if the business is small. They would go to the NAICS code under sam.gov to determine their small business availability.
Okay, thank you.
I got sharp people, which is a blessing, by the way. What else? We got anybody else? Any other questions? Well, if you do, please feel free to ask any of my folks if they can't be of service. We can certainly get any answer that you would like and provide you any information that you need. I can tell you again, you need to understand and hear it right from the horse's mouth. I am responsible and I am leading Indian Affairs proactively to engage and promote the use of Buy Indian Act and increase economic opportunities and dollars going out to Indian country. No one's doing it more. So you can, anytime you think you need more answers or assistance, any way I can provide assistance or my folk, that means me or my folks, by the way, we're going to do so. So again, thank you all for the opportunity to join you today and look forward to engaging with you in the near term.
Okay, thank you. We appreciate you participating in our event today and all the great information that you shared with us. Okay,
Absolutely.
so next slide, Jeremy. Okay, Aaron.
Thank you, Vanessa. And what we're going to talk about today are the Native American PTACs and how they can help your Native American-owned business. In the United States, there are 6 Native American PTACs, and those PTACs cover 11 Bureau of Indian Affairs regions. So what you have is, of a total of 94 PTACs nationwide, 6 of those are devoted exclusively to servicing Native American clients, and all 6 of those PTACs are represented here today. Now, the services that are provided by PTACs and particularly Native American PTACs, those services are provided to the clients at no cost. Our services to you are completely free of charge. So I tell my clients sometimes, it's true that there's no such thing as a free lunch, but your PTAC is probably about as close to a free lunch as you're going to get, because we ask for nothing really in return except your participation in a survey, a quarterly survey. And we ask that if you are fortunate enough to get a state or local government contract or subcontract, that you please take the time to let us know. But otherwise, we don't ask for anything in return. So the services are offered to you at no cost. And we're funded in part through a cooperative agreement with the Department of Defense. So you have the PTAC host, and the host pays for a certain set percentage of the operation of the PTAC, but the rest of that is funded by the Department of Defense, and we're grateful for their support. Maybe we can move on to that next slide.
Is that me? Okay, my name is Mike Channel. I'm from the Nebraska Indian Community College's PTAC. And here are the items that the 6 Native American PTACs provide. And we can only work with Native American owned businesses and tribal entities. So we go through certification, application assistance, to make sure that we've got everything squared away for the different tribal businesses. We educate on procurement programs specific to Native American owned, tribally owned, and Alaskan Native corporations In other words, we identify the niches that every business has, how it works, why it works, and what the capabilities are, and we encourage them not to sell the certification, but sell the capabilities of your business. It's all about forming relationships and trying to identify the market. We work with people on an entrance plan, a growth plan, and an exit plan. We help them create capability statements, depending on which agency they're approaching. They have one or two capability statements, and we try to get them to write them specifically to the agency that they're approaching. We try to unite businesses with purchases and decision makers. In other words, good business is getting people going in the same direction together. So you have more eyes looking for opportunity, connecting with primes and subcontractors. My PTAC is new. And if it wasn't for TEPA, they're large, they're successful. They give all of our business owners hope. We've got everything from people working out of the back of their pickup trucks to established businesses in rural areas. But we really try to connect everybody to try to help them build their backlog and build the financial stability to where they can step up and really, how can I say that? Kick. Yeah, we want them to succeed completely. SAM registration process. That's what we were talking about earlier, the IEE certification and the SAM profile, going through those types of things. Basically proposal reviews. I get calls all the time from people that are saying, well, I wanted to do with this agency. I wanted to propose something with this agency and everything else. We try to get the business owners to focus on specific agencies that they're going after. And they're not going after everybody that's posting on SAMs or any opportunity that they see, because we want them to build brand recognition, try to build a rapport with the agency that you're dealing with, and always be nice. Don't go back, I'm going to file a protest on this because I lost it by whatever. Don't do that. You build a relationship. You're dealing with the federal government. You want to be a problem solver, not a problem. Okay, post-award support. That's again what we're talking about. Just going back through, look at the bigger picture. Really think about what you're doing and how you're approaching this. Market research. We'll go through USA Spending and some of these other agencies and try to find out the agencies that are in their service area, and get the numbers off of the goods that they're buying in their NACS code and going through the information. I am still learning on the CMMC myself, so I can't relate on that subject at all. But I can tell you we got Carrie Wagner is one of our clients. And she's had 8A certification and only has it for another 20 some months. And we're really trying to get her squared away on some of the scheduling. And George and I had a conversation, and we all share information. We all go back and forth and share. But we talked about GSA schedules and whether it would be more of a better vehicle for her because of the encounters that she's run into with the Army. So that's my slide.
Next slide, Jeremy.
Bourbon Hamilton with the Tribal Government Institute, Native PTAC in Oklahoma. And here are the networking tips. Have a strategy before meeting a contracting officer or a buyer. Know what agency you're speaking to. All agencies are different. Make it about value, emphasize the return on investment. We always say time and value, or time equals money, make it a win-win for everyone. So everyone wins. PMs like to brag on when they win. Know the history of your contract and rewards. That goes back to your strategy. Do your homework. Be sure to look on Federal Procurement Data Systems /SAM. One of these days, FPDS will all go into SAMs, but it's still up. I think I heard a quote from a guy named Guy Timberlake. He calls it ethical stalking, where you can be sure to look up old contracts. Have perseverance. Keep on trying. Keep on trying. Even if you fail, ask for a a debrief, win or lose, so you know that the good points of what you won or what your what you did, and that you can always sharpen your skills in your blade. Timing is everything. Be in the right place at the right time. What we're talking about is on this one is October 1st is the new year, is the government new year. And so what these PMs are doing, these contractors are doing is they're trying to get their ducks in a row starting in June, July, August. So that's when they're really look for sources sought at this time. Don't be a jack of all trades. This is a red flag to contracting officers. Don't tell them that you're just a one-stop shop. When you say that, that's automatic file 13 for most of the contracting officers I know. Demonstrate what you do and how you can do it well, on time and under budget. That is my slide.
Thank you, Bourbon. Next slide, Jeremy. Good afternoon, everyone. Now it should be afternoon with most. My name is Vanessa. My name is Vanessa Gleach. I'm the program manager for the American Indian Chamber Education Fund, PTAC. We service 3 BIA regions, 100%, the Pacific, Western, and Northwest area, which encompasses 7 states: Oregon, Washington, Idaho, California, Arizona, Nevada, and Utah. And in the states, it's 197 tribes, federally recognized tribes that we provide assistance to. So it's in all areas of understanding the federal procurement process, how to maneuver through the process, but not only on the federal side, but also working with tribes and working with state, local municipalities, and in the commercial field, because not everyone is ready to get into, jump into the federal side of contracting. So some ease into it, some are more work better as subcontractors. And so we provide assistance in helping them to understand relationships and how they can leverage and, make money and prosper as a small business. Next slide. Jeremy. Okay, this is our PTAC staff. We have 4 office locations. I'm in Chandler, Arizona. I'm the program manager. And then in our Huntington Beach office, we have Aaron Emmy. He's our senior procurement specialist. He used to be in supplier diversity. He worked for Toyota. And so he's very knowledgeable, looking at it from the perspective of a small business liaison, working with businesses. So he's able to help businesses understand, what a buyer views or how they're thinking when they meet with a small business. And then we have Maurice Begay, who has been in federal contracting for years and has helped businesses, startups, helping them with financing, helping them with grants. So he has a vast amount of knowledge in working with Native American businesses and other businesses. And then we have Annette Walkley, who's in the same office, and she's very good at researching, helping businesses to understand, how to identify their target market, but, looking through and understanding how SAM works and just, what it is to team with other companies. And then in our Richmond, Washington office, we have Jeremy Sandoval. He is, his background is engineering. So he's our IT guy. I mean, anything that we need as far as trying to figure out how to, set up these webinars. He's been our savior, so to speak, in setting up our training, our meetings. He's young and can work through technology. So, but he is very good at pulling histories of looking at who what agencies have bought, who are the contracting officers, what's being forecasted. And then we have Linda Sandoval in our Roseburg, Washington office, or I'm sorry, Roseburg, Oregon office. And she's very good as far as helping on the tribal side. So her background is actually in Native American studies. So she's, worked on, learning about, tribal law, how, things have been set up. So she has a vast amount of knowledge in that area. And here's our website. So we do have trainings, posted on our website, and that's it for our PTAC. Next slide, Jeremy.
And this is Bourbon Hamilton with Tribal Government Institute, Native PTAC. We're out of Oklahoma. Our service area is Eastern Oklahoma, EIA, and Southern Plains region. So actually, the whole state of Kansas, the whole state of Oklahoma, the whole state of Texas. There's 4 tribes in Kansas, 38 federally recognized tribes, 2 of the big ones in Oklahoma, and 3 tribes in Texas. So our office is located in Norman, Oklahoma. Next slide, Jeremy. There's my contact information, Bourbon Hamilton, Program Manager, Gary Gann, Procurement Counselor, Denise Bowman, she's a CPA here, Judy Warren, we picked her up, part-time counselor from Oklahoma PTAC. She's well-versed with the state of Oklahoma and other, she's also a former KO from the Air Force, Mary Margaret Gann, CFO, and there is our website, tgiok.com, and we do post all of our training there, and our past training we recorded on YouTube. So if there's a topic you can see, you can always go to our website, and it's my PTAC.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Thomas Jefferson. I'm the program manager for Native American Development Corporation, PTAC. We cover the Rocky Mountain and Great Plains region, which is Montana, Wyoming, North and South Dakota. Can you go next slide, Jim? We just now recently hired 1 extra person, but like I said, my name is Tom. I'm the program manager. I have Heather Latre. She covers the Wyoming area and parts of North Dakota right now because we don't have anybody in North Dakota. Our North Dakota person had to resign due to COVID, so that was kind of a setback for us. But yeah, COVID really hurt our office the past year or so. Marshall Lucas is our supervisory procurement specialist. He handles eastern Montana, parts of North Dakota, and anywhere he can help out. We also have Robert Much. He covers pretty much the whole western part of Montana. Montana is pretty big, so we had to separate people and make sure everybody can cover each reservation. And we just now hired a lady named Abby Amda, and she's going to be covering our South Dakota office. She's going out there right now, and so she's hitting up every reservation, getting herself known to everybody, and making sure we're up and running in South Dakota again. Our South Dakota office was down for about 4 months too, because that person had to resign due to COVID too. A lot of our people got COVID and got really sick and weren't able to make it back to work. So we've been had a lot of staff changeover. And our website's right there, just like everybody else. We have our trainings we have a calendar that has all our trainings. We pretty much have a training every Friday from 11:30 to 1:30. We call them some lunch and learns. Pretty much all the businesses preferred Friday as their main time to do some training. So that's kind of how we scheduled it. But if we can, we usually do trainings throughout the week if somebody needs to. And that's about what I got for our NADC PTAC.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is George Williams. I am the program manager of the National Center American Indian PTAC. And our PTAC covers 100% of the Eastern, 100% of the Southwest, and 100% of the Navajo BIA service areas. Next slide, please. And here's a listing of my staff and office locations. I'm located at Lockheed Martin in Marietta, Georgia. I'm the program manager. Our office manager, Kathleen Weeks, is located there. We have a Window Rock, Arizona office. It's on the Navajo Nation, and Mabel Sosi works there. She's very fluent in Navajo. Actually, English is her second language, and her ability to counsel clients using the Navajo language has been very beneficial to our PTAC. In Albuquerque, New Mexico, our office is in the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center, and Adolfo Vasquez is there. Adolfo is a former Army Lieutenant Colonel. He has an extensive background in contracting, and he's especially good at post-award issues and in dealing directly with contracting officers. In Centennial, Colorado, we have a procurement specialist there. His name is Stan Sams. Stan has a small business background, and it gives him the perspective he needs to work with the Native American-owned small businesses. He's from the Cherokee Nation. We have Chris Pierce up in Liverpool, New York. We have another office at Lockheed Martin up there. Chris has been working on and off with the National Center since the 80s. She's our most experienced counselor and has a wealth of knowledge regarding Indian country. And our newest office, we just opened it at the Tunica Biloxi tribe in Marksville, Louisiana. Chris Jenson is working there. And Chris has a background with the Coast Guard and also working with federal prison systems. Next slide, please. Whoops. We are also want to let you know, we are having a matchmaker tomorrow. And I'm going to put the link up in the matchmaker in case those of you have not registered. It's our Bureau of Indian Affairs Indian Health Service matchmaker. It's tomorrow. I'll put the link in there. And also a question was asked about the different NAICS codes that the Bureau of Indian Affairs and Indian Health Services procures. I'm also going to put a list of the NAICS codes in there that these contracting officers are looking for. Thank you.
Thank you, George.
Good job, George. Okay, my name is Mike Channel. I am the program manager for the Nebraska Indian Community College. We are the newest tribal PTAC. The Nebraska Indian Community College is in a small upper right-hand corner of the state of Nebraska. And the gentleman that wrote the grant said that we were going to get 75 clients in the first year. So COVID hit, everything else. But we have gotten a mod. Natalie Ross has been very gracious and very kind and supportive to our program. And we got a mod to cover the state of Nebraska. We've brought on several, we're all native. All our staff is native. Sunny Hill I brought in because of his economic developments, history with different tribes in North and South Dakota. So we're talking to Thomas on a regular basis and going back to you, so we're not stepping on anybody's toes. And then also with Bourbon Hamilton, we met with him about the Iowa tribe and going down through there and getting the stuff squared away. And the college is actually talking about the Iowa tribe to open a career center there in that community. So we've been very fortunate. But our main campus is in Macy, Nebraska. And Deborah Grant lives on the Omaha reservation and is very well connected in the community. Harold Sunny Hill lives in Rosebud, South Dakota, on the Rosebud Reservation. And we really are trying to focus on getting away from just dealing with the tribal communities on the surface, but really trying to get into the community. We do not have an administrative assistant right now. Haley Henscheid was our administrative assistant, and she ended up getting accepted to grad school in New York City. So we're very, very excited for her. But the position that we want to fill, we want to get really into the communities through radio, through TV, however we do it, going through there, trying to really open up the avenues to be able to meet with several people. The tribal entities are great. TEPA is one of our customers. They've got 18 companies under their corporate umbrella. The Iowa tribe, because of COVID, they have Gray Snow Management Solutions, and they have 28 service providers under their corporate umbrella. Katiwa has come back, and they're opening an office in Nebraska. And those guys have a total of 5 companies, corporate companies that are underneath that are tribally owned. And then we're dealing with the Omaha tribe, Mike Grant, and then the Santee tribe, trying to create opportunity. But it's all about creating change. We represent the federal government in Indian country. They're the bad guys. So we have a hurdle that we have to cross there, and trying to win the trust of the people. And through life experiences and past performance, we've enjoyed some good relationships. So that's it for me.
Darren, you're muted.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Darren, or morning, depending on where you are. My name is Darren Osborne, and I'm the program manager for PEDCO PTAC. And PEDCO is an acronym for the Ponca Economic Development Corporation. And that is our house, the Ponca Economic Development Corporation. PEDCO PTAC, we're Native American PTAC that provides our services to businesses, Native American owned businesses in the 4-state region of Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And that covers a total of over 36 tribes. So a pretty broad area for us to operate from. You'll see here that we have our website address. So by all means, go ahead and check us out online. And if you're interested in receiving our services and you're a business located in our service area, please connect with us. We would love to talk to you. Maybe we can go ahead and move to the next slide. All right, so our office is situated physically in Carter Lake, Iowa, but again, we serve that 4-state region, and a lot of what we do is done virtually as well. So distance shouldn't be an impediment for any business that would like to receive our services. You'll see my contact information on here, but you'll also see Sheila Creason. She's our procurement specialist, and Sheila has nearly 20 years of federal government contracting experience. She's a wealth of knowledge and information, and a great asset to our business as well. And we also have Judy Meyer, our new executive director, who's identified there as well. So you have my phone number as the program manager. If you're interested in becoming a PEDCO PTAC client and you're located in our service area, please, by all means, connect with us. We would love to help your business succeed. And I think that might be it for the slides.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Darren. Our next speaker is going to be Nick Matoka. He's the headquarters small business specialist with the U.S. Department of Interior Indian Affairs. And he, Nick, you're getting your presentation up?
Yes,
Or
thank
Jeremy?
you. I'm
Okay.
going to pull that up right now.
Oh, okay. All right. Great. And just so you know, Nick has been just stellar in working with our native PTACs. I mean, as soon as he was hired, he jumped right on it and said, we need to have an event. So, thanks to Nick and everybody at Indian Affairs, we're able to bring this to you today. Go ahead, Nick.
Great. Thank you so much for the introduction. And can everybody see my slides here?
No, we don't see your
no.
slides.
Let's see. Oh, maybe it would help if I accidentally click
there we
that
go.
last button.
There we go.
Thanks. Okay, great. So again, my name is Nick Matoka, and I'm the headquarters small business specialist over at Indian Affairs. And I would also like to introduce, you heard from him just briefly so far, Brian Shulkoff, the chief of the contracting office here. He will be kicking things off for our presentation here. So Brian.
All right, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm filling in for the head of the contracting activity, Tony Lomlin or Anthony Lomlin today. Unfortunately, in an unexpected appointment and had to take off, so I'm filling in for him. I'm going to go over a lot of information Jim already provided to you, so I have a nice easy job. I'm going to talk about the acquisition accomplishments, our ongoing current projects, and then I'm going to hand it back over to Nick to talk about the recent changes to the regulations on Indian Affairs and the Buy Indian Act. So Nick, next slide, please. This first slide just goes into the amount of Buy Indian that we've done over the last 4 years, or the increase to Buy Indian over the last 4 years. As Jim mentioned, in 2018 or fiscal year 2018, we did about $80 million. And in FY21, last fiscal year, we did $280 million. So a $200 million increase to our Buy Indian spending. So it is a phenomenal increase. We're really hoping to do over $300 million this year to Indian businesses. And a significant portion of that, is we've already mentioned, was construction and IT. Construction has significantly increased over the last 2 to 3 years in Indian Affairs, and I can continue to see it rise, especially with the BIL Act that was passed, bringing more money to infrastructure. So we're really hoping to increase that more and provide more opportunities for Indian businesses. Go ahead, Nick. I think the next slide is going to be on just small business engagement. Most of our awards are to small businesses. As Jim mentioned, we have a lot of IDIQs and BPAs. A majority of those IDIQs and BPAs are to small Indian-owned businesses. So it's a significant portion of our work. Over 75% of our actions go small business. So you Indian small businesses out there, be ready. More work is coming, especially the last 4 months of the fiscal year. We're doing probably 60% of our obligations occurred during the last 4 months of the fiscal year. So be prepared for the amount of work that's going to be coming, and be checking sam.gov for opportunities. Next slide, Nick. Next slide is the competition rate too. Significantly increased in competition to 85% last year. I'm not sure how much further we're going to be able to get in 2022. Because eventually we are going to hit a cap, because there are some sole source actions we do have to take, utility contracts, some sole source software, but as much as we compete here. We want every small business, Indian small business and Indian large business, to compete on our requirements. So we have that notification where everything we have that could be posted, we post to sam.gov or post to our IDIQ and BPA holders. So competition is big for us. Next slide, Nick. The other projects we're working on, Jim mentioned the first one here is we are communicating and coordinating with the Office of Small Disadvantaged Business Utilization in Department of the Interior to help track total Indian business spending throughout Department of Interior, and hoping to increase that a significant amount in this year and in our out years by setting up Indian small business and large business goals for each bureau in the Department of Interior. So that's going to be a big win for everyone on this call. So it's great. Next, we have monthly PTAC meetings with the people you heard from prior to this. Significantly helps us coordinate, communicate, and let them know what opportunities we have upcoming and what we see that we need to grow businesses into that we haven't seen before. Like I said prior, construction is a big spend for Indian Affairs right now, and we want to continue to bring small Indian businesses into our group to continue to work and continue to grow businesses for us. Next, we are creating a Buy Indian Act training for all Indian Affairs employees. That will be rolled out in the July timeframe for all Indian affairs. It's about a 30-minute training that goes over the Buy Indian Act and goes over procurement authorities and procurement process. So everyone knows what they need to do and how to follow the Buy Indian Act. And then next is Nick is a big player on this, is the Native American vendor list updates. Nick is the headquarters small business specialist for Indian Affairs. He is constantly updating it, constantly providing that list actually to other bureaus to assist other bureaus in utilizing Indian-owned businesses. So we're continuing to grow that. We're continuing to get outreach, work with the PTACs to get new vendors added to that list, and share that across Indian Affairs and the Department of Interior. Next slide, I believe I'm going to be handing it over to Nick to go over the changes to the regulations. So Nick, take it over. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Brian. So first, we'll just be covering a little bit of the overview here of the Buy Indian Act at Indian Affairs. So as we know, the Buy Indian Act of 1910 provides the authority to set aside federal procurement contracts for Indian-owned and controlled businesses. And so while this authority is used exclusively by Indian Affairs and Indian Health Services, the entire Department of the Interior has been delegated the authority to purchase using the Buy Indian Act. So that goes hand in hand with what Brian was mentioning about the training that we're developing, because there's been more and more of a stronger initiative to have other bureaus within the Department of the Interior use the Buy Indian Act and use this authority to be able to set aside procurements to ISBs and IEEs in general. So we do think that the training is greatly going to help with that, just to make sure that all bureaus really have the resources and tools they need to know how to utilize the Buy Indian Act. And so just real briefly, and I'm not going to read all of this, and I think most of you are probably familiar with this, but the latest definitions under the Buy Indian Act, I underlined there federally recognized, because that's a clarification that is now in the latest version that we use. So any business activity owned by one or more Indians or federally recognized Indian tribes. And then the ISB portion at the bottom. And ISB is basically any IE that is also a small business concern, established in accordance with the criteria and size standards of 13 CFR Part 121. So I think there was a question about that earlier that I don't know if we got to, but one of the questions is mentioning how if SAM.gov doesn't mention that somebody is an ISB, it was appropriately answered there that if they're an Indian economic enterprise and they're also identified as any small business concern under any NAICS codes, they would be considered an ISB as well for those NAICS codes. So just some further definitions of federally recognized Indian tribe. And again, I'm not going to read through all of these, and we'll make sure that the slides are available. We will be sending them out eventually. And an interested party, I'll briefly cover. So that's an IE that is an actual or prospective offer whose direct economic interest would be affected by the proposed or actual award of a particular contract set aside pursuant to the Buy Indian Act. So this definition is important when considering the representation provision at DIR 1480.802 or challenges to representation as prescribed in DIR 1480.9. And I guess this would be a good time to bring up, if you're new to the procurements here in Department of the Interior, we have what we refer to as the DIR, that's the Department of the Interior's acquisition regulation. Specifically, DIR 1480 regulates how the Buy Indian Act is used for procurements within the Department of the Interior. And so one of the parts there, 1480.9, it goes over how somebody can challenge a representation. So let's say that you as an ISB notice that there was a procurement that was set aside to ISBs, and you see that the award was made to a business that you think may not actually be an ISB. there's a process to go through that is prescribed there in DIR 1480.9. But in order to be able to utilize that, you have to be considered an interested party. So that's when that definition is applicable. So if you are an actual or prospective offer for the solicitation, you would be considered an interested party and could then pursue a challenge to the representation. And so now we'll get into some of the specific DIR revisions that are effective with the latest Buy Indian Act regulations. So effective May 9th, 2022. These are some of the highlights of how the DIR was revised. So it eliminates the restriction on Indian economic enterprises from competing on covered construction contracts issued under the Buy Indian Act. It expands IEE's ability to subcontract work subject to the Buy Indian Act, consistent with other government socioeconomic set-aside programs, and it gives greater preference to IEEs. And we'll get into a little bit of this here to further explain some of this. So for the elimination of the restriction for covered construction contracts, DOI has determined that the covered construction language, the regulation, is no longer required by law. Therefore, DOI has removed all references to covered construction throughout the regulation. So the key takeaway there is that all construction contracts may now be set aside to IEEs. So that's a big win for ISBs and IEEs in general. And also the expansion of Indian economic enterprises' ability to subcontract. Previously, there was a restriction regarding the ability of IEEs from subcontracting more than 50% of the work to firms other than IEEs. And the revised rule does not change the 50% subcontract limitation for supplies and services. However, the 50% limitation was not consistent with FAR 52219-14 limitation on subcontracting, because that has different limitations for construction awards. So therefore, the revised rule allows IEEs to subcontract up to 75% for construction by special trade contractors and 85% for general construction. And so the purpose of this change is to ensure equal treatment of IEEs in federal procurement and remove subcontracting barriers for IEEs. So overall, I hope you see the general trend of the ways that the DIR has been revised is to really strengthen how ISBs and IEEs can compete for contracts with the Department of the Interior and Indian Affairs. It's meant to give ISBs and IEEs more flexibility and allow us to give greater preference as well. And so another area where that's being done is the preference for Indian small business economic enterprises. And so the revised rule provides clarity and simplicity to the preferences granted to IEEs under the Buy Indian Act. So as you might know, and Jim touched on this as well, the previous order is that we used to have to go ISB, then small business, then IEE, then unrestricted. However, this revised section adds language that the contracting officer will give priority to ISBs for all purchases subject to the Buy Indian Act. His previously preference was only given to ISBs when the purchase was commercial or a simplified acquisition. So in addition, if the contracting officer determines that there is not a reasonable expectation of obtaining competitive ISB offers, then the contracting officer will give priority to IEEs. And these are just a couple more parts of the DIR here. And I believe there was also a question, and I saw in the chat pod that we couldn't get to. I believe somebody was asking if at least two ISBs. I think the question was, so if we need to expect at least two offers from ISBs in order to make it an ISB set aside. And the answer is really yes or no. So they're really the CO, so this is the actual regulation. The CO will give priority to ISBs for all purchases, regardless of dollar value. However, if the contracting officer determines after market research that there's no reasonable expectation of obtaining offers that will be, and there's a keyword, competitive in terms of market price, quality, and delivery, the CO may consider either a set aside for IEEs, or a sole source award to an IEE as authorized under the FAR. So we generally do want to make sure that there's competition, more than one ISB. However, there are also cases when we might have set something aside as an ISB set aside, and let's say we only received one quote and it's from an ISB. The contracting officer can, as long as they determine that the price is fair and reasonable and it meets the requirement, even though there was only one offer and it was only one ISB, the contracting officer can proceed with an award to that ISB. And so then 1480.401E, if the contracting officer determines after market research that there's no reasonable expectation of obtaining offers that will be competitive in terms of price, quality, and delivery from ISBs or IEEs, then the CO must follow the deviation process under 1480.403. And I'm not going to cover the entire deviation process because that's really more so for our buyers, that, the contracting officers and contract specialists. But I'll just point out that, it's not just a simple check the box process. It's not meant to be easy to deviate from the Buy Indian Act because we really are dedicated to obligating as much of our money to ISBs and IEEs as possible. So they can do their market research and they can make the determination that they're not going to get offers that are competitive in terms of price, quality, and delivery, but they still need to go through a deviation process where their decision's going to be scrutinized, reviewed, and we'll try to turn it into an ISB or IEE set aside if we can. Of course, there are just times when there really are no ISBs or IEEs that can perform the work. Some utilities, some cell phone service providers, there are some cases, but it's really quite astonishing how vast the marketplace is with what ISBs can do. So that's why we do have a strict deviation process. That generally concludes, and I see there's a lot of chat filling up, so I'll try to get to any questions, but I'll just say, like I said, we do want to share these slides. The last couple of slides are really just for some informational purposes, telling you what parts of the DIAR were revised. And these are some of the acquisition leadership that we have here at Indian Affairs. Jim Anderton as the Chief Financial Officer is also the Bureau Procurement Executive, Tony Lomlin as the HCA, Brian Scholkoff, as you heard from him, is the CCO for BIA, and Ryan Geffrey, the CCO for the Bureau of Indian Education. And I'll just leave this slide up here for a moment as well. My name is there at the bottom. I think I've had a chance to meet with quite a few of you, but if not, there's my information. Feel free to reach out to me, especially if you have any questions or concerns about the presentation today. If you have any questions that you might not be able to think of right now, or you just don't want to ask in front of everybody, I will be sure to get you an answer.
Okay.
So with that, oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Nick. I'm sorry.
No.
Go ahead. Finish.
I was just going to say that I'm going
Okay.
to stop sharing so that I can read the chat pod appropriately as well, because I'm not the best at navigating these share screens with PowerPoint.
Oh, yeah. No, so we can ask the question. So one of the questions
Okay.
that they had is, what are the bonding expectations for construction solicitations?
I'm sorry, what are the what expectations?
Bonding expectations. I mean, are
Oh,
the
I'll take that one, Nick. For the bonding capacity for construction, it depends on the project. So each solicitation or IDIQ in the actual solicitation itself, it will have the bonding capacity that vendor must meet. So just you have to refer back to the solicitation.
Okay, thank you. Now, here's another question that we had. In one of your previous slides, you had mentioned under construction that the revised rule allows IEs to subcontract to 75% for specialty trade and 85% for general construction, which follows the limitation of subcontracting. So does that mean that if a Native American owned company, it's a by Indian set aside, a Native American owned company is the prime and they subcontract to another Native owned company, they can use a similarly situated rule to meet that 25% of, well, the 15% and then the 25% of the construction. Does that make sense?
Okay. Brian, I don't know if you have an answer to that, or this is something that we might have to follow back up with on. I'm not positive I'm following the entire question.
I don't have an answer for it this time. If you can send us that question, there's a lot of percentages thrown out. We'll dissect it and get an answer back to everyone.
Okay, all right, thank you. I guess it's that 50% that a lot of our companies have questions about, meaning that that can't be subcontracted to a non-native firm. So when we take a look at that, because 25% has to be self-performed by the small business under the specialty trade. So does that mean that 50% of the 25% can't be subcontracted out? So I know it's a lot of math. So what we'll do is we'll email you the question. Okay. Oh, there's
Okay.
another one. Just wanting clarification. One of the questions in the chat that they put was that, and I know you answered it, but they just still want just to make sure that they heard what you said. So what you're saying is that that two ISBs don't have to be identified in order for it to be a bi-Indian set aside, correct?
So I would say that 9 times out of 10, we would be looking for at least 2 ISBs to be available to set that aside, because, again, we need to make sure that we're awarding, again, the keywords here being competitive in terms of market price, quality, and delivery. The easiest way for us to, and not just easiest, really the most thorough way for us to determine prices are fair and reasonable is if we're having multiple offers for the same requirement from similarly situated companies as well. So while there's not a rule of 2 identified here in 1480, it's generally what we would do in order to ensure there's competition.
Okay, and then is there a certain dollar threshold, like under the SAT level, that you wouldn't have to do the rule of 2 and they could just find one, Native-owned business that's fair and reasonable in their pricing to award?
So if it was a sole source under an IEE, it would still have to follow the sole source procedures that are in the FAR. So it generally, it wouldn't just be, giving an award directly to an ISB. There are 8A options that are possible. So in that case, if the ISB is an 8A, there's the potential for that.
Okay, all right, thank you. And here's one. Oh, you mentioned that that DOI uses the Buy Indian Act. We are a supplier of goods and a woman-owned ISB. Can you point us to the list of DOI buyers for office, medical, dental, and school supplies? Do you buy dental? And
in Indian Affairs, we do not buy dental. That would have to go to IHS. School supplies, in a prior slide, Nick had Ryan Geffrey as the CCO for BIE, but everything should be posted on sam.gov for our requirements, especially school supplies. Usually we should not be sole sourcing school supplies. So it should be openly posted.
And then here's another question. Does DOI use the GSA schedule, or are most of the opportunities posted on SAM?
DOI, I would say majority of the other bureaus outside of Indian Affairs probably use GSA. But for Indian Affairs, we rarely use GSA because most of our contracts fall, 85% of our contracts fall under Buy Indian. So it's posted on sam.gov.
Okay, thank you. Here's another question. Does anyone happen does anyone happen to know for a non-service purchase tangible items, does the Buy Indian Act apply? I was on a similar presentation from the VA, and the BAA applies to their purchases.
Well, the Buy Indian Act applies to all purchases. Now, with the recent change, as Nick mentioned before, it was covered construction wasn't applicable under Buy Indian. Now, everything we buy should be under Buy Indian.
Okay, all right. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. Let's see. Okay, here's one other question. If a CO is going to offer a purchasing solicitation, can they go straight to local area set aside if there is a local Indian-owned vendor offering the item sought?
In most cases, no, we're not going to do a local area set aside. We will just openly compete it on sam.gov.
Okay. All right. Oh, here's one. Then I know this is going to be up to the contracting officer, but the question is, are the construction contracts normally low bid or are they negotiated?
In most cases, most construction contracts are lowest price technically acceptable. Larger contracts, you may see a trade-off for that, but in most cases, lowest price.
Now, here's another question. On purchases for supplies, does the requisitions or do the acquisitions follow the Buy American Act?
Yes, they would still fall under the Buy American.
All right. I don't, hold on a second. Okay, I don't, does Brian have an estimate of what industry is most procured?
Oh, say that again, the industry?
Yeah, the industry, I guess the NAICS code, what is,
So I don't have that on me in the NAICS code, but we will pull that data. And when I send you, Vanessa, the list of IDIQs, I will provide the NAICS codes or the most used NAICS codes for Indian Affairs.
Yeah, because there's also, kind of a tricky question to answer, because are we talking, the most, the quantity, the most contracts that we award, or the highest, most in obligation, you know what I mean? Because you might get a single construction contract that's $50 million, but that's one contract. Whereas, maybe we have 100, IT contracts that are, under $100,000 each or so. So it just also a little bit tough to think about that. But we do have data like that available, like Brian said, so we can try to share what we can.
okay, and then we have another question from a Native American owned company. They sell organic juice. They actually sell it nationwide in grocery stores. Would they be contacting BIE? Because wouldn't that be purchased by the schools more so than other agents?
I would recommend that they contact BIE. Other agencies or other offices in Indian Affairs would buy that, but it'd be a very small quantity. So it would be BIE would be the best agency to reach out to.
Okay, and now here's a question. I know you probably don't purchase healthcare staffing, or maybe you do, but do you purchase any kind of staffing services?
We have a ton of staffing services. That's PSC code, usually R499 and R498. We have a $30 million IDIQ right now. We call it the PALS IDIQ for a staffing support contract. We have an acquisition contract, but recently we're finalizing the solicitation for a $210 million business support IDIQ that will be posted on SAMS.gov or SAM.gov in the next couple of weeks, and a $100 million IDIQ for program management, industrial engineering IDIQ in the next couple of weeks. So it's going to be set aside for Indian small businesses. So be on the lookout for that. They are both department DOI wide and IHS wide IDIQs. So We're hoping to get a lot of Indian small business competition and award multiple IDIQs off that solicitation. So please
Okay.
look on sam.gov and see if you're interested.
Exactly. Okay, thank you very much. And and then yes, just to everybody, the presentations will be sent out to all the attendees. And gee, this is a long one. Thank you, Purchase. Okay. Is there a way for the government to more broadly, outside of BI and IHS, recognize ISB as a unique socioeconomic category in competitions at the same level as it looks at 8A, Service Disabled Veteran, EDWSB, Indian owned? I know it by Indian is a public law and other agencies can utilize it, but it's at their discretion. Is there anything being done by Indian Affairs to try to get other agencies to recognize by Indian? I know it's a big question, but or a political question, but you know,
I mean, of course, we're always trying to branch out to other agencies. You know, we started with Department of Interior the last couple of years, and we made significant progress with awarding a $200 million demo IDIQ. Last year, that was department wide. Now we're trying to link up with IHS to set up a multi-agency IDIQs, and then from there expand to other agencies. But like you said, it's hard. We can't force them to use the Buy Indian Act, but you know, we're trying to put easy vehicles in place. Like Jim said, if you build it, they will come. If we put IDIQs in place for other agencies to utilize, we're really hoping other agencies will utilize it outside of Indian Affairs, DOI, and IHS. So I know I couldn't fully answer it, but we're trying our hardest.
Yeah, no, we understand. And I want to thank, you know, both you and Nick for presenting and providing us this information. I know it's going to be very helpful for the businesses online, you know, just understanding that there has been some changes, you know, to the Buy Indian Act, you know, and hopefully, you know, it'll increase, you know, the spend to Native American businesses. So we really appreciate everything you provided to us today. And, you know, anybody who has any additional questions or more in-depth questions, here's the contact information for everybody. And Brian, can we send out your email too?
Yeah.
No okay. Okay. We'll also include Brian's email, but, you know, please email Nick. He's very good about responding and, you know, finding answers for you. So, you know, he should be your, you know, first point of contact. And then also, if you're interested in getting on their vendors list, email Nick, and he can definitely, you know, put you on that vendors list and, you know, help you with any other questions that you have, you know, moving forward. So yes, I really appreciate, you know, the time that you've taken to present today. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Our next speaker that we're going to be having is Santiago Alamares. He's from Indian Health Services, and he will be talking about Buy Indian and how it's how Indian Health has revised their portion of the Buy Indian Act. Santiago?
Yes, good afternoon.
Yes.
Just doing a sound check.
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. As mentioned, my name is Santiago Amaras, and I am a member of the San Carlos Apache tribe located in Eastern Arizona. I am the director for the Office of Management Services and also the agency head of contracting activity that oversees the agency's acquisition policies and procurement needs. I first would like to thank American Indian Procurement Technical Assistance Center for planning and coordinating this event in support of the Buy Indian Act and connecting Native-owned businesses and to IHS and BIA contracting officers. Next slide. So I'd like to take a quick moment just to quickly share the IHS mission and goal. Both are very unique in contrast to other federal agencies. I've also included the Division of Action Policy mission, which reflects on all IHS contracting officers. In support of these mission and goals, IHS procures a wide range of more traditional and common goods and services, but also procures certain culturally acceptable goods and services in raising the physical, mental, social, and spiritual health of American Indians and Alaska Natives to the highest level. Next slide. So listed here are IHS most common and highly procured categories. For the past few years, IHS has obligated over $1 billion in commercial contracts. This year, we are estimated to hit 1.3 billion. One huge update to the BIA and IHS final rule is the inclusion of all construction contracts under the Buy Indian Act. I mentioned construction because IHS does obligate close to 100 million in commercial construction per year. In addition, through the Infrastructure and Investment and Jobs Act, IHS will receive $3.5 billion for sanitation facilities construction. This is a tremendous win for Indian country when it comes to fully funding the more than 1,500 projects in the sanitation deficiency system throughout IHS. Next slide. So as mentioned on the previous presentation by BIA, the Buy Indian Act is one of the oldest placed into law. This act authorizes the Department of Interior, Bureau of Indian Affairs to procure goods and services from native-owned and controlled firms without using the normal competitive process. And IHS provides healthcare to American Indians and Alaska Natives, and this authority derives from the Snyder Act of 1921. Through the Transfer Act of 1954, Congress transferred this responsibility and other healthcare functions from the Department of Interior to the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, later identified as the Department of Health and Human Services. Although the act has been on the books since 1910, it has not been enforced due to no rules adopted or implemented. The Buy Indian Act only applies to IHS commercial contract opportunities, and the act does not apply to contracts issued and managed with the tribes under the Indian Self-Determined Education Assistance Act, ISDA, also known as 638, or for purchases also issued for services obtained through the Purchase Referred Care Program, PRC. Next slide. So also mentioned in the prior presentation, this rule amends the current HHS acquisition regulations and supplements the federal acquisition regulations. This rule formalizes the administrative and acquisition procedures for all IHS acquisition activities and locations. And this includes all area and service units, including the National Supply Service Center, which procures a large portion of IHS medical supply needs, and the Division of Engineering Services, which awards most of IHS construction projects. Additionally, in support of the Indian Community Economic Enhancement Act of 2020, the IHS and BIA have collaborated in harmonizing Buy Indian Act procurement procedures to ensuring uniformity. As attested here in this event, both IHS and BIA will continue this partnership moving forward in strengthening and improving how we comply with the Act. The Enhancement Act also identifies that each secretary support expanding the Buy Indian Act throughout DOI and HHS. Initial discussions have already taken place on how HHS can accomplish this moving forward. More to come on this will be even more encouraging move for Indian country that will provide for additional contract opportunities across HHS optives and staff divs. That includes FDA, NIH, CMS, etc. Next slide. So this rule for IHS is a tremendous win for Indian country by supporting the overall growth of native-owned and controlled businesses, and will also create jobs in rural native communities and urban native settings, which helps address high unemployment and joblessness rates in these areas. The IHS, where authorized and practicable, will consider all eligible commercial contract dollars to be set aside for native-owned and controlled businesses. We fully understand the intent of the Buy Indian Act, and we want to ensure that Indian country can benefit from the more than $1 billion in IHS contract opportunities available annually. This is a substantial amount that can be made available to assist in promoting economic sustainability and development in Indian country. And with this new rule, IHS now has the regulated procedures and reporting requirements that supports IHS in systematically identifying Buy Indian Act contract numbers. Next slide. So I'm not going to cover the deviation pieces of this as it was kind of covered on the previous presentation. But of course, there is a deviation process, and we can go to the next slide because the deviation approvals are a bit similar, but then also a bit different than Department of Interior BIA. These are the thresholds that we are currently following. As you can see, anything above the micro purchase up to 25K can be approved through this the local CO. Anything above $68 million would have to be reviewed and approved by our HHS OSNBU director, OGC general counsel, and also the HHS competent advocate and the senior procurement executive. So a lot of approvals and reviews to jump through to get that approval for anything over 68 million, which is a plus for IEEs and SBs. Next slide. Representation, as mentioned before. So really it's just representation by Native-owned companies that must hold these particular responsible IEs and prevent, this process in place to assist in identifying responsible IEs and prevent circumvention or abuse of the Buy Indian Act. So IEEs and ISBs need to ensure that they meet the following criteria to include completing and self-certifying IE status on the IHS designated IEE representation form. So if you're looking to respond to Native-owned procurement opportunities with IHS, you want to ensure that you utilize the IHS self-certifying IE status form. I'm sure BIA also has their own form, but they're pretty similar. Next slide. One more slide on IE representation. I won't read through this, but it's similar to what was provided on the previous presentation. Next slide. So one of the things is quarterly reporting. So IHS will conduct quarterly reporting on the below listed items in connection to the Buy Indian Act. These reporting requirements will not only support IHS monitoring and compliance of the Buy Indian Act, but will also provide information and data to tribal leaders, IEEs, IHS, HHS leadership, and Senate committees on how IHS is implementing and complying with the Buy Indian Act. Next slide. So here are the three point of contacts. Of course, here's my information here as the HCA for IHS. Mr. Ken Truesdale, who is the acting director for Division of Action Policy here in Rockville, and also our small business specialist, Jonathan Ferguson. So any one of these three individuals, if you have any questions in regards to IHS and the Buy Indian Act, you can contact, and we'll be happily to provide response back to you. Next slide. And just want to provide some resources as to where you can locate information on regulations, as well as a link to our DAP website for IHS, as well as to our Indian Economic Enterprise Representation Form. And with that, I'll go ahead and end. I believe there were a couple of questions that I saw already, and I think most of the questions may have been already answered by BIA, but I wanted to kind of touch on a couple of them. And one of them was provider or health services staffing contracts. As you know, we do provide for opportunities for provider contracts at our many areas, clinics, service units out in IHS. And so that's something that is definitely very, very challenging is obtaining these services at these areas, because a lot of these locations are located in very remote locations. So that has definitely been a challenge, not only to fulfill for FTEs, but also to fulfill for these contracting needs. So definitely looking forward to the response in terms of Native-owned companies that are able to establish themselves. A lot of them on this call already. A lot of them I've already been in communications with at other outreach events. So definitely looking forward to it. There was a question also about oral care supplier, as well as prescription eyeglass providers, in terms of, can we provide for opportunities, or can we be identified as an IEE? As also mentioned by the BIA, it all depends on the CO, and it also is required by our COs to do a source of sought notice, especially with this new implementation of the Buy Indian Act. We want to ensure that we are giving the opportunities made available to Native-owned businesses. And one of the things that I've been doing in a lot of these outreach events is welcoming industry to question or to challenge, I should say, question more, any solicitations that you may see or source of sought notices that you feel have not been made available to Native-owned companies. So if you see a solicitation that was set aside for small business or other, that's not by Indian, I do welcome you to reach out to that particular CO or to myself, Mr. Ken Truesdale or John Ferguson, and we will be more than happy to look into the situation. We've done that already on several opportunities that have occurred here since this final rule has been implemented. And so I want to continue to welcome that, because I do want to ensure that our contracting officers, as well as our program officers out in IHS, are making available opportunities to Native-owned businesses in Indian country.
Okay, Santiago, this is Vanessa. This question was asked earlier, but I didn't give it to DOI. It says, as I get more familiar with IHS needs, I will work to prepare myself for resource. I'm seeing various sources sought notices that I'm not able to bid on right now, but am preparing for in the future. If no IEE sources are found, will it be revisited in the future?
Yes, ma'am. So right now, similar question is being asked by our program offices and COs. With the Buy Indian Act implementation final rule, we have quite a few contracts that have not been set aside or awarded to Native-owned businesses. And so we are asking program offices and our acquisition community to revisit those procurements and to conduct market research to ensure that they understand industry and the market under the Buy Indian Act. You hear it all the time from program offices identifying that this is what we've done for the last 10, 15 years. I like this, or I prefer this contractor. That's great. But we do want to provide for opportunities, especially under the Buy Indian Act, to allow for these opportunities. As if there are instances where there are only one particular source or one particular vendor that provides this under the Buy Indian Act, as mentioned by BIA, we will follow the FAR and ensure that the CO is confirming or determining fair and reasonableness. But also, as we are more consistent with setting aside these opportunities, we're going to see more and more opportunities. We're going to see more and more partnerships and teaming arrangements with these contractors. As I've been participating in these outreach events, I'm approached by a lot of non-native owned businesses asking how they can connect with native owned businesses. And so events like this, events like your business conferences, your small business summits are items that we've identified to those particular companies that they should participate in. And so one of the things we're looking at is trying to obtain a listing of these events so that we can make them available, whether it's via email or word of mouth or just posting them to our IHS website. We're still working with our general counsel to ensure that we can do that. I don't think there's an issue, but we'll look at that possibility. But that's one thing that we see as improving on native-owned companies establishing themselves or partnering up with other businesses to make these medical goods and services that are not heavily being provided by native-owned companies at the moment change for the future in the right direction.
Well, thank you. That's great news for us, especially if you can post, our annual events that we host, because each PTAC does host an annual event. Now, here's another question. Are IT services and data management going to be set aside as Buy Indian? for IHS?
Yes, ma'am. We still want to follow the FAR, and we also still want to comply with the Buy Indian Act. And the CO's initial market research and ensuring that they at least see if there's any native-owned businesses out there. That's an important piece there, is when you see a source of SOT notice posted, it's very important that you read that particular notice. And if it's something that your business can provide, then definitely speak up and respond. Because if you do not, then in the instance that the CO does not receive enough information to make a determination that they can compete or set this particular resuscitation or this acquisition aside, they'll do so. Just like any CO in the federal government, they're going to do their market research. And depending upon what they receive in terms of responses, they're going to base that on their set aside or their acquisition strategy. And that's really what our COs are also going to do. So when you see those sorts of SOT notices come out, please do respond. Even if it's something that you have a question on, is whether or not you can do the work, please ask questions. Please reach out to our COs to get more information. That's what we're here for. Or reach out to the PTACs, because that's what you're also there for too. So
Yeah, that's right.
I learned a lot about the PTACs here in the last couple of years to know that you guys are a great resource to our Indian communities.
Yes, thank you. Then here's another question. I'm not sure you'll be able to answer this one, but it's on COVID rapid tests. How does IHS intend to provide opportunities for native-owned distributors / sales agents to supply these items? Our understanding is that there is a standing order with Abbott that is blocking other test providers.
Yeah, we're currently, as you know, with the pandemic, and there were quite a bit of challenges in obtaining medical goods and services, to include testing supplies and testing kits. And so at this moment, we're in a better situation. We have quite a bit of contracts out there with companies like Abbott and Cepheid. As we become more consistent with setting aside, as I mentioned before, and we will continue to do that. We'll continue to set aside for these particular opportunities. And it's kind of like what BIA said: you build it, they'll come. When we started BIA, when we started the Buy Indian Act with BIA back in 2013 or before that, there weren't a lot of native-owned companies that provided for goods and services under for BIE and for law enforcement. But as we began to be more consistent with setting aside these opportunities, we saw more partnerships, more teaming arrangements, more native-owned companies coming out to establish themselves. The same will happen here with IHS and these particular medical goods and services categories, to include testing kits, to include pharmaceuticals, to include provider contracts, etc.
Okay, thank you. And then here, my business is the security surveillance system. How do I get contracted for any jobs, bids, when a new IHS or small clinic is going up? It's a long process.
Yeah, so with the IIJA, we also, there's quite a few construction projects that are forthcoming. It's important to keep an eye out for those, because a lot of times, or in some instances, they include those particular pieces in their construction plans and their strategy or their acquisition plan, to include that they provide for not only the building construction, but also medical equipment, as well as IT systems that go in those particular buildings. So it's definitely good to keep an eye out for those opportunities. I said $3.5 billion has been set for IHS to receive. That's quite a bit of money to include the already $1.3 billion that we're going to procure for FY22. So when I first arrived at IHS, we were almost at that 1 billion mark, and we're surpassing that now. And more as we move forward, we're going to see more and more funds available from a contract perspective to the Indian country for those native-owned businesses.
Okay, thank you.
Hey,
Okay, here's,
Santiago and Vanessa, if I may weigh
Yeah.
in.
Yeah.
As John Ferguson. Hi, everybody.
hi.
Thanks for being here. Just additionally is to have that business start looking and building relationships with those native construction companies, because since that work would be ancillary to those construction contracts, it'll probably be set aside or be subcontract work. So they want to make sure that they're in a position to have qualified teaming partners that they can be a subcontractor for. So they shouldn't not only just wait for those requirements to come out, but make sure that they're building those relationships in advance of that, so they are prepared when it hits the street.
And then in the solicitation for when you're building new healthcare facilities or hospitals, is there going to be somewhere written that it's advisable that they use native-owned subcontractors? Is there some kind of like preference if they use a native-owned subcontractor?
Yeah, I can kind of speak on that. So the answer is yes, and we're going further in that, and we're looking at entering into a partnership, a memorandum of understanding or agreement with Department of Labor, Office of Federal Contract and Compliance Programs, to ensure that when we do have contracts like that, especially construction contracts that occur on or near reservations, that they comply with the Indian Preference Program. Department of Labor identified that they have the resources to be able to conduct audits on these particular contracts to ensure that these companies are complying with the Indian Preference Program, and that they have a program in place. A lot of times when these particular contracts are issued, there's a question as to how is BIA or IHS ensuring that that particular company is complying with that Indian Preference Program. So this is something that we're looking to establish and partner up with the Department of Labor to ensure that we have that added kind of support from Department of Labor to be able to conduct those audits.
Oh, well, that's great. That's great news. Okay, so here's another question. Does IHS give preference points to an ISB if it is a small business set aside when the sources sought shows only one native-owned business, especially if the quotes are fair and reasonable?
They give, I'm sorry, you say,
I guess the question is, would they give preference if there was a qualified Indian small business economic enterprise company preference over other small businesses if their price was fair and reasonable and met all the requirements of the quote?
Yeah. So if I'm just doing a sound check again. My headpiece was dying. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
All right. So similar to what we mentioned before, both BI and IHS, it really depends on how the set aside occurred. If it's set aside for Indian small businesses, then of course, if they're the only response and the contracting officer can determine that it's fair and reasonable, and of course, they can move forward and issue a sole source or any other particular award, they can do so. But if it's set aside under a small business, of course, that does mean also that the contracting officers should have conducted their due diligence in ensuring that they identified if there were any native-owned businesses that were available. So if it's set aside under a non-Indian small business or non-IAE, say they've gone through that market research already, and they're conducting for small businesses. Something that we won't be able to provide in terms of preference, if they're competitive and they meet they meet the fair and reasonableness, then of course they'll be evaluated against the evaluation criteria of that particular solicitation. But if there's an instance that maybe two or more or a competition of native-owned businesses come forward, then it's up to that particular CO and the program office to identify if they'd like to move forward in canceling that solicitation and reissuing it. It all depends on timing as well and the need for that particular service or supply.
Okay, thank you. And then here's another question. Under the Buy Indian Act, how is subcontracting determined? Can an ISB/IEE subcontract to non-native owned companies, or are we required to subcontract to other native owned companies? I think Nick, Indian Affairs answered that earlier, but I guess your take on it, Santiago.
Yeah, you know what, I if you don't mind, John, I like to defer to you because you are definitely the subject matter expert when it comes to subcontracting. If you don't mind.
Well, so yes, I would first reference the person to make sure they're looking at the HISAR to see what the new subcontracting requirements under the Buy Indian Act state. So definitely look at the Federal Register, which has the final rule, and it does address subcontracting, because I actually did look up that. I want to make sure that I was giving good advice. So for small businesses, there is a limitation on subcontracting clause which would still apply since these are FAR contracts. Clause 52-219-14, limitation on subcontracting, states that a small business must perform at least 50% of the total cost of the contract. So they would be eligible to subcontract the remaining 49% or 49.9% to other qualified businesses. There in the HISAR, it does have additional restrictions under the Buy Indian. So if it's a Buy Indian set aside, there's a certain percentage of that subcontract work that can be set aside for native businesses as well as non-native businesses, I believe. And I've got to put my hands on the citation, but I'll go by memory, and I hate to do that because I'm getting older, but I believe it's 50% of the subcontracting work has to go to a native firm. So they would be, a non-native firm would be eligible to participate at 50% of the subcontractable costs, or 25% of the total work. But I'll look that up. I'll look the citation up, and I will provide that in the chat before the session's over.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Okay, here's another question. Often I see the sources sought notices with such a fast turnaround time, we miss the response deadline. Will there be more time to respond, or do we need to just sit on sam.gov on a daily basis?
No, if you see a situation like this, like I mentioned earlier, I do welcome you to provide or question that CO. And if you're not getting a response from that particular CO, do reach out to me or Mr. Ferguson or Mr. Truesdale. We'll definitely look into the matter. There's been a few situations like that we've seen where a posting is a few days. And of course, there is a posting requirement under the FAR that all of our COs, all COs must follow. So that's why we want to ensure that not only are we allowing for opportunities, ensure we allow for opportunities to native-owned businesses, but we're also following in compliance with the FAR.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other questions in the chat, just a lot of thank yous for providing information, and just the fact that you are looking at putting something in there as far as utilizing Native American businesses for subcontracting opportunities for larger contracts. So that's a great thing. And Jonathan, go ahead.
I can just jump in one more second.
Yeah.
I just put a link to the Federal Register,
Yeah.
and it should be directly to the subcontracting portion of the HISAR. So the vendors that are on the call are welcome to look at that at their leisure. One other thing around this, since we're talking about sources sought notices, it is the best practice that anything under the SAT should have a sources sought notice of at least 7 days, 7 calendar days. And for anything over the SAT, should be at least 15 days sources sought notice. And of course, commercial items Part 12 requirements give the contracting officer discretion to shorten that time up. But that is the guidance that comes out of the OSTABU to the acquisition staff, that the sources sought notices should be 7 days for under the SAT and 15 days over the SAT. And again, of course, there might be extenuating circumstances into the fiscal year, critical need at an area office, that they may have to shorten that time up. But anything like that, those folks should be communicating with me and or Santiago and Ken to get clearance on that before they move forward. So if you see anything that goes out, because the last thing I want to do, and this is not just for native businesses, but small businesses in general, I don't want to see a source of SOT notice go out on a Friday and due on a Monday. And as we talked about before, Vanessa,
Yeah.
there's no time to do that work. And as a former contracting officer, I don't want to see proposals due on a Friday or a Monday, because we want people to have their weekends as well. So we want to make sure that we're being considerate of the vendor community and making sure that we get what we need. So if you see those types of situations occurring, especially around the source of SOT notices, please let me know.
Especially when they're due Eastern Standard Time and then you're on the West Coast. I'm just
And
kidding.
notice of intents as well. If the CEO is considering to do a sole source and they're doing a notice of intent, the FAR states that the notice of intent has to be posted 15 days prior to the solicitation being issued. So that should be a 15-day notice of intent notice.
Yeah.
And then businesses that can do that work as well.
Thank you. And then here's the question. Is there a way that payments can be made sooner than 65, 90 days? I'm not sure what the payment process is, but instead of, I guess with some that are net 30, but being paid later than net 30. Contact Jonathan and Santiago.
That's really it. If you're a contractor at IHS and you haven't been paid in a timely manner and you're still working to get that payment, I would encourage you to at least see.
There seems to be an issue across the federal government in terms of federal
government. And there's the Prompt Payment Act for small businesses.
Yeah.
So that's out there too, that the federal government's supposed to be paying small businesses in a faster time frame than they normally would. So within 15 days, I believe it is. Again, I don't have the citation in front of me, so don't hold me to that. Go make sure you read that clause in FAR to make sure that you understand it. But yeah, if you're having problems getting paid, let us know so we can work with the area office and you to facilitate and expedite that.
Just one more note on a GSA e-buy. Since GSA doesn't allow for opportunity to set aside under the Buy Indian Act, and so if you're seeing particular sources or opportunities that are being set aside under GSA, again, I do welcome you all to challenge to ensure that the CEO has gone through and made available or conducted a source of SOT notice under the Buy Indian Act, because the GSA does not at the moment. Hopefully in the future they will set aside for Buy Indian.
Okay, all right, thank you. I don't see any other questions or comments from anybody else, and looks like we're ending right on time. Oh, hello. Okay.
Hi, this is Aubrey Salazar at the Kansas City District SBA. I just had a quick question on the rule of two. So the Buy Indian Act and the DIR don't have rule of two language. So are we talking that the DIR is prescribing FAR to, represent that rule of two, or is this just a best practice? I guess I'm confused about the rule of two.
It's more competitive. So as long as there is the CEO determines that there is going the best interest of the procurement, there'll be competition. If they cannot identify a competition, like say there is only one particular Indian-owned firm that responds, then of course it is up to that CEO to make a determination on whether they want to move forward with a possible sole source, or if they want to deviate away from the Buy Indian Act and go to another set aside. It's really a case-by-case situation for that particular acquisition. And then you also have to look at the historical data of how that particular acquisition was conducted in the past. But I mentioned though, things change overnight in terms of the market. And so if a particular source of SOT notice was done last month or even a couple of days ago, things can change overnight. So we're encouraging and requiring our COs to ensure that they do a source of SOT notice and help support their documentation. So when they do submit a possible deviation, those are the things that we're looking at to ensure that they've gone through and provided for these opportunities. We're not just signing these with a rubber stamp, deviation approved. We've only received a handful of these so far since March 14th. So you should see a lot more frequency from the IHS perspective in terms of set-asides and sort of SOT notices under the Buy Indian Act.
Yeah, I was just looking for if it was rooted in an acquisition rule, so it was actual regulation around procurement. Because I thought that's what made the Buy Indian Act and the DIR distinct from the FAR, is that there was no rule of two language. So I was just wondering if the DIR was prescribing to the FAR in terms of that, which it does throughout. But if you're just talking about a best practice, like, well, we really don't want just one source, so we're going to wait for, a few sources to come in, that you can run the contracting office how you see fit and, do that. But if there's no acquisition rule, I was just wondering if that was, you could actually tie that back to a FAR or DIR rule.
Brian, I guess that on the DIR part of it.
So I can say that, yeah, so we still do have to use the FAR as, regulations that when we use the Buy Indian Act and the DIR, it doesn't, it's not in a vacuum, if that's one way to put it. We still have to follow what is provided in the FAR. We can't do something that violates the FAR. It gives us the authority to go straight, having ISBs and IEEs as our first preference. And then when we do that, the DIR 1480 provides the procedures for how we move forward with a set aside to ISBs or IEEs. I don't know if that helps at all. Because I mean, for example, so if we had a sole source procurement to an ISB, we still need to follow procedures that are in FAR Part 6. We still have requirements in the FAR that we have to use in conjunction when we use the procedures under the Buy Indian Act portion of the DIR.
Okay. Yeah, I saw under the questions when it was going through the Federal Register that was one of the comments or suggestions for improvement, was that you get rid of the rule of two. And then somebody responding to those questions on the Federal Register indicated that there was no rule of two. So there was nothing to change. So that was, maybe that got me confused. I'm not sure.
Yeah, the DIR 1480, that is correct. It's silent on the rule of two, but COs still have to make that determination that, how do we know what we're going, are we really going to get competitive fair market prices and quality if we would only expect one quote from an ISB, especially if you're only expecting one quote, you might not get one quote, and then we just wasted time there where it might have been available as an IEE general set aside. So there is some grayness there that COs really just have to support their strategy.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Nick, and Jonathan and Santiago for attending today and all the information that you provided to us. We will be distributing the slide decks that were presented today, in addition to the NAICS codes that George went and put up in the chat. If you didn't download those, we'll also provide that to all of the attendees. And then any other information or questions that you have, the contact information for Santiago and Nick are up. And then I think there was one question, Santiago, somebody had wanted you to put up the slide, I believe, for the contact information, one of your last slides before, but like I said, we'll go ahead and provide everything, all the questions that were asked in the chat information. And we are recording this session, so you'll be able to listen to it later on at your leisure. Okay. And I don't believe there are any other questions. Any last comments from any of the native PTACs? Are there any PTACs? Okay. Okay. Or a little bit over time. So I'd like to thank everybody for participating today. And, please sign up if you haven't signed up for the matchmaking. We still have slots available for tomorrow. And it's just, your chance to meet with buyers, pitch what it is that you sell, services or products. But, you don't get a time to do this with contracting people. So, definitely take a look at that. And that information was posted. And again, thank you, everyone, Indian Affairs, IHS, for taking the time to participate today. We really appreciate it.